Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Norma Fleagane. We're going to be discussing her amazing book, Sneaky the Hairy Mountain Monster, How I Lost My Parents. Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much any online book reseller. Head on over there, get lost in it, and while you're at it, understand that this is not the only book that Norma has written, okay? Now, Sneaky the Hairy Mountain Monster has been developed into a series. So you're also going to be greeted with Sneaky the Hairy Mountain Monster Goes to Church, Sneaky the Hairy Mountain Monster Goes to the Bahamas to the first ever monster convention, and lastly, the Blue Sea Monster terrorizing Palm Beach. I'm recognizing a pattern here, people. Head on over there, pick up your copies today because these are fun books that you're going to want to embark upon with your children, and we're going to go more in depth with it in just a moment. But before we go any further, I want to quickly point out that Norma was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And of course, if you follow me, you already know I'm talking about Quipper Prints. So listen to me. You're a writer out there. You're listening in right now. You've put all this work in. You've gotten your masterpiece completed. And now you find yourself at a crossroads because you need help moving the book you just wrote. Well, listen, I hope you're sitting down because I have the answers to your questions. You got to contact Quipper Prints. They're one of the best in the business to do it. And frankly, this is exactly what they specialize in. Head on over to quipperprints.com today and gather all of the ways that they're going to help maximize your creative endeavors. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Norma here on the line. Now, as I mentioned to you before, these books are so fun. Okay, they're children's narratives. So right off the bat, you understand the genre, or at least the bracket that this is going to fall under. Now, it's a children's narrative, but if these are fun, nonstop page turners, so they're entertaining, but they all have little subtle messages interwoven within them that are really going to help give some positive messages and a bit of education there to your children as well. Now, in this book, there's going to be a number of them. One, learning how to become independent. That's very important. Also, learning the importance of never judging a book by its cover. No pun intended. Listen, there is so much happening here. These are gems that your children are going to love learning about, and also having it under the disguise of a really fun journey. And at the end of the day, this is just one book. We are going to scratch the surface. We're not going to go too far below it because you got to head on over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And by the time we've concluded, you're going to do just that because you're going to understand how valuable these books are, not only for my parents out there, but especially this is going to be something you're going to enjoy giving to your children, and your children are going to enjoy reading. They're going to take the fun back to education. There's so much here to be offered, and Norma is the expert. It's her books. She's written it. And she's going to be able to articulate all of them much better than I ever could. Norma, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm doing just great today.
Wonderful. Wonderful, Norma. That's fantastic. Wonderful to hear. And listen, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. All right. We're looking forward to this discussion. And I know we have a lot of information to cover because you have a number of books that you've written, hopefully many more on the horizon. Now, before we go into the book, Norma, start off by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I studied early childhood education at Ohio University. I was born in Ohio. I lived in Florida for a while, and we moved back to Eastern Ohio. Actually, we're living in Wheeling, West Virginia now, and we go to Florida about 5 months out of the year in the wintertime. But I'm married. I have 6 daughters, and I have uh, 7 grandchildren and 1 great-granddaughter. And I started writing these books because my grandson, my youngest grandchild, was 4 years old at the time. And he loved me to tell him spooky, scary stories. So at bedtime, I'd tell him a scary story. So I'd make it up, but he always wanted me to go back to tell him the sneaky one. So I would always have to tell him about the sneaky story. So that's how I came to writing this book about Sneaky. And it was because of him. And he was my inspiration to do this. And my daughter, Holly, his mother, said I should put it in a book. So that's how I got to writing. Yeah. And everything else just evolved. I only intended to write one book, but it evolved into several other books. So here I am. Now I've written my 6th book. My daughter Holly wrote one book about Sneaky, and my husband and Blake and my grandson, and I wrote one book about Sneaky. Yeah. And that's how I got started.
I love it. You know, I not only love the fact that this just flourished in the way that it did, but also the fact that it's a family affair. I mean, I think that there's something just so pure and beautiful about that. And of course, you know, leading into my next question, because since we've talked about inspiration and have begun down that road, I'm going to stick here for a little bit. Norma, these very easily could have been books that stayed on your personal shelves. Right. And again, really just a family activity that you all did together. You took it a step further, though, and published the book for the masses. What inspired you to put it out for others?
My daughter, she told me, she said, Mom, she said, some of those books out there, she said, they can't even compare to this story. She said, you got to put it in a book. So I thought, okay, well, I'll do this. I'll try. And so I looked up publishing companies, and I found Christian Faith Publishing, and they said, send me your manuscript. So I did. And they liked the story, and they published it. And I went from there. So that's how it all got started.
Love that. Love that. You know, Norma, without further ado, you have a lot of books that we're going to touch up on here today, but the anchor is all about Sneaky, the Hairy Mountain Monster, How I Lost My Parents. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
Yeah. Well, Sneaky, the Hairy Mountain Monster, How I Lost My Parents is about Sneaky, who was separated from his parents in a flood. And people from my area understand what the high river used to crest and overflood the banks and flood the island and even the town of Wheeling, West Virginia. And growing up, I used to remember seeing articles in the newspaper about people who was swept down the river in a flood, or somebody who perished in a flood. So anyway, I put that in my book, in this Sneaky, the Hairy Mountain Monster, How I Lost My Parents, because all my other books, there were questions that children were wanting to ask about Sneaky, and one of them was, well, why does he live by himself? Where's his parents, So that's why I wrote this book, to answer the other questions. They want to know why Sneaky has 3 eyes. Why does Sneaky have 3 eyes when his parents only had 2 eyes? Just little things like that I would get from other people, other children that would ask a question.
Yeah.
So that's what this book intended to do, was to answer all these questions that children had asked, or were maybe hadn't even thought about asking yet.
Mm-hmm. You know, Norma, going into your writing process here with this next one, but can you describe a moment when your own characters or storylines took on a life of their own, surprising even you as the author?
I have an interesting story to tell about a handyman that I had here at my house, was doing some repairs one day. And so when I paid him, and I asked him, I said, do you have any children? And he said he had a 4-year-old son. So I said, well, here, I said, I'm a writer, and I said, give this to your son. So I gave him a book. Actually, it was one of the books that you did not mention. which was a Christmas holiday. And so I gave him that book. The next day he called me. He said, "My son loved your book. I had to read it to him 4 times." So anyway,
Wow.
that was that. Yes.
There you have it. Listen, kids can be some of the toughest critics, okay? And if you're able to get that, if you ask me, that's a stamp of approval right there. People, again, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much any online book reseller, they're going to have her books. You want to get lost in all of them because Sneaky, the Hairy Mountain Monster, is something that your children are going to love.
My first book, just called Sneaky, is the first book that I wrote where Sneaky would growl at night and people would hear him in the city here, in the town. And Sneaky's, everybody would wonder where this sound was coming from. It was coming down from the woods. So grandfather said one day he was going to go hunt for this monster and find out where it is, because he would appear, but he would disappear just as quickly. Mm-hmm. People would get a glimpse of him, but really didn't see him. So he decided he was going to go hunt for the monster. And of course, Blake, being 4 years old, he wanted to go with Grandpa. But Blake was excited because he wanted to go, but yet he was scared to go also. Then when he got the approval to go with his grandfather, he was excited. And so he's juggling a couple of emotions there because he was afraid, but yet he was excited. But he also felt safe because he was with his grandfather.
Right.
So they went to hunt for this monster, and they found him in a cave. And I won't give the end of the story, but they were surprised at what they saw. So anyway, that's the first book, and that's how it got started. But my grandson was 4 years old. I call him Blake in the book, and that's his name. And he loved scary stories, and he liked them to be really scary, but he also felt safe where he was. Mm-hmm. So he had those two emotions.
Norma, as we start to close out of this book, because I do want to give you an opportunity potentially to go into another one of your other titles. If you could enter the world of the book that you've written, now we can keep it here with this one, or you can open it up to any of your other titles, but if you could enter the world of the books that you've written, which page would you choose to land on and why?
Well, probably my last book, I think. Well, maybe my first book too. But and it'll be the last page, and the last page of my very last book, Sneaky the Hairy Mountain Monster, How I Lost My Parents, because it's a very touching page, and Sneaky cried, and in a lot of my books, Sneaky cries, and I always ask the question, why do you think Sneaky cried? So that's the very last page that I write. So that is to create dialogue between a child and a parent, if a parent's reading it to the child, or to make the child think. And I would like to see children think instead of being doctrinated. A lot of schools and a lot of churches, too, doctrinate children. And I'd rather have children think than to be doctrinated.
Right.
I would have to say the last page of my book is why do you think Sneaky cried? Because I always put that on the last page. The Sneaky cries because people cry for different reasons. People cry because they're sad. People cry because they're happy. But most of my books, they end up they're happy.
Love that. And I think a great point by showcasing it in that way, Norma, the fact that it is okay to be vulnerable. I think that is a notion that is lost so much in society, especially when it comes to men, right? Especially when it comes to boys. There's this stigma that men are not supposed to show emotion. And listen, people, let me tell you here, first and foremost, and I know a lot of you already know, I personally think there's not many other things that are more manly than being brave enough to showcase vulnerability and being able to cry. great lessons here. People, I'm telling you, the education is surreal. It's not meant to be an educational book, although, again, there's those subtle nuances. So there's always those teaching moments. But Norma really wanted to make sure that it wasn't something that became preachy, right? Or overly educational. It has just enough there for you. I'm telling you.
Just enough. I try to include a new vocabulary word or two, but I don't want it overpowering that they wouldn't want to read it by themselves because it would be too exhausting to have to go look up every word. So just enough.
You know, Norma, as we start to close out of this fantastic interview, I said it before, I wanted to give you an opportunity to go into another one of your books. So please, dealer's choice here, because nobody knows them as well as you do. Pick another one of your titles, any one, and give us a brief elaboration of what to expect within that one.
Well, a really fun book was the Blue Sea Monster, which very seldom we ever talk about. Mm-hmm. But that was just something that my husband and Blake and I were just sitting there talking about this movie, and I would say a part the book. I would say a section of it, and then Blake would add something, and then my husband would add something, and my husband and Blake, they would decided they were going to go down. We lived in the condo at the time. It was in Florida. They decided they better go down and chase the monsters away out of the parking lot. So they would take pots and pans, and they were banging them, walking around the parking lot. My husband actually did this with his grandson, and it was scaring the monsters away and looking for them under cars and around the pool and just chasing monsters away. And there was the Blue Sea Monster was a blue sea monster who came and stole children off of the beach and took them to an uninhabited island in the Bahamas. And grandfather and told Blake, he said, we got to go find those children. So anyway, they went and they got the helicopter, went down to the airport, got the helicopter and flew around the different islands and things. And so Blake was, grandfather told Blake, he said, you look out that side and I'll look out this side. And so anyway, Blake saw something shiny and he said, there's something shiny down here, Grandpa. So Grandpa turned the helicopter around and so they landed on the island, and here it was. One of the children had a cross on, and the sun was shining on the cross, and that's where he saw the sparkle, and so that's what happened.
I love that.
And I won't give the end of the story of that book either. But
smart woman.
That's just the thing goes. It was just a silly thing, a thing that they did, and it was actually something that they actually did. They went down and was scaring monsters away off the beach.
I love it. Listen, sometimes you just got to be in your imagination, right? You just got to play a little bit.
Yeah, really.
You know, it's easy for children to do. I think adults, just with the everyday pressures of adulting, we tend to forget that our imagination is there, right? And we should utilize it. I love that story. I love this book. I love these books and what they all represent and what they can mean to you and your children. So you already know where you got to go. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I mean, people just type it in the Google search bar. You're going to be greeted with a whole host of places that you're going to be able to pick them up. The anchor for today was Sneaky the Hairy Mountain Monster, How I Lost My Parents. But remember, Norma has a ton of other books. Check back in frequently because I'm hoping, fingers crossed, there's much more on the horizon. You know where you have to go. Pick them up, get lost in them. Wonderful books to add to your shelves. Even better gifts to add to someone else's. Head on over there today and pick them up. Norma, this has been an absolute pleasure. Such an honor. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.